It's just this tidal wave of Christian nationalism crashing over the country. So the short version is that if Project 2025 is implemented, our rights and our democracy will be lost to Christian nationalists, extremists.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture.
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward
for inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up and tell you where we were last week. And then later on in the pod, we sat down with Andrew Seidel, who is the Vice President of Strategic Communications for American United. We're going to talk with Andrew about Project 2025. It is a very informative pod that you're not going to want to miss. Stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, and you?
I am well, feeling a little refreshed and re-energized after having a few days off. It's kind of nice.
It was. You and I got to spend some time with some of our favorite people in the world in one of our favorite cities in the world, Boston, Massachusetts.
Yeah, so we went to see our boys last weekend. We decided to celebrate your birthday with them in New England and had a great time and ended up, the North End in Boston where we stayed actually threw an amazing weekend of parties for you.
They did. And I want to give the Bostonians some props for making certain that the temperature was reasonable while we were there.
Oh my goodness. It was amazing. Yes, it was so nice. But we ended up, I got a little Airbnb for us in the North End. If you're not familiar with the Boston area, the North End is famous Italian community. I mean, everybody goes there to eat and hang out. It's a really cool place. Anyways, but unbeknownst to us, we scheduled our trip for the weekend of the St. Anthony's Feast of all feasts.
It was such a surprise and so much fun.
So much fun. We had no idea, had never heard of this, but apparently National Geographic has named this the Feast of all feasts, as I mentioned. Thousands upon thousands of people descend on the North End. They decorate and close off, several of the streets. There's vendors everywhere, musicians. They have a parade where they take the St. Anthony's statue and I think St. Lucy's, and they walk them down the street, and people follow and celebrate them and their legacy and staple money to ribbons that are, wrapped around them to raise money for charities and for social justice causes. And it was just a really cool experience. It was
such a cool experience.
All weekend long.
One of my favorite parts of the morning as the festival would be preparing for the crowds that were about to come was we would walk out and all of the leaders of the festival were in the same attire. They all wore the same color. And so
they did.
We tried to guess each morning, what color is it? What color is it? And there may have been a time or two where we went back and changed to make certain we honored St. Anthony in the appropriate way.
It was really funny. Much different than my religious upbringing. We didn't mix, that kind of celebratory fun party with religious services. So it was kind of a neat mix on that and just such a time of equal parts spiritual experience, I guess I would say, but also just celebratory and joyful party. So it was really neat. I was really thankful that we got to be a part of that. And
it was really
experience.
The experience really reminded me about what religion should really be about, and that is the bringing people together. And that's what we experienced in the North End over the last week. Just seeing people getting together, enjoying community, laughing, sharing stories, eating way too much Italian food.
Right.
and listening to music and just, really just having a great time and then also helping each other through generosity. It was really, really cool.
So, I was doing some reading once we got home about more of the historical or origins of this feast that takes place in the North End. And, it was begun back in 1919 by Italian immigrants from the small town, and I'm going to butcher this, Montefalcione. I don't know, in Avellino. I don't know.
That's so much
Sorry,
better than
guys.
I would have said.
But my point being that this whole area of Boston that is now so famous and so revered and celebrated and really in our country was begun by immigrants who were poor immigrants that came to this country seeking a better life and brought with them such rich tradition. And how I've just started thinking about how we have all, our country and everyone has benefited from the richness of those areas and of those cultures and of these festivals that we get to participate in. And it just, I don't know, it just got me to thinking about our attitude now to those folks who are, coming to our country seeking a better life. And sometimes by excluding them, what are we robbing ourselves of, I guess?
Yeah.
Just think if we hadn't let these people come and settle there, what we'd be missing out on.
Yeah. And I think probably the best testimony to the entire experience having to do with St. Anthony's Festival was that the suggestion that our two adult sons made at the end that we may need to consider making this an annual event because it was such a good time. It was like, wow, when you get 20-year-old, adult sons saying that, it's like, wow, this must have been pretty cool.
It was just such a fun time. But, not only that, but we also did a couple of other things to celebrate your birthday.
We did, because when you asked me what I wanted for my 54th birthday, what did I say to you?
You to go see Childish Gambino in concert.
Which every 54-year-old man wants, right?
Right. So when you discovered he was going to be in Boston just a week or two after your birthday, you said, let's go. Let's bring the boys. Let's go to this concert. So we did. I had not been to a concert in probably 20 years. I'm not a concert goer, but it was super fun.
For those of you who do not know, Childish Gambino is the alter ego of Donald Glover, who is an incredible comedian. He's a writer, also is the writer, producer, actor of Atlanta, been on several different movies as well. He's just super talented, and I love him as an artist as a whole, love his music. And so, I said, hey, what would be fun for me to do and share an experience with you and my two sons? I thought Childish Gambino, can't beat that. And what was funny is that when I called the boys and asked them if they would be interested, it was like, duh, Dad, we are so going. So we did. We had a good time, and it was an incredible concert.
It was a great concert. The Sox game we went to, not so great, but being on Fenway is always fun.
That's right. We did go. You guys surprised me with a Red Sox game the day after the concert, and the Sox are having a tough time right now. They're in a losing streak, but it's always good to be at Fenway Park.
Well, I am very much missing my daily dose of cannolis from the North End. Having a little bit of withdrawals right now, and also having a little bit of back to reality with our interview today.
Yeah. I mean, we had such a good time over the last 10 days, and now here we are having to talk about serious things again. So. Yeah,
but thankfully, Andrew Seidel from Americans United for the Separation of Church and State agreed to come on with us to talk about Project 2025. And while the topic is not super fun, Andrew is super fun. And I really enjoyed our conversation with him.
Yeah, I did too. Project 2025 is this dark, ominous document that has been in existence for quite a while. It's come into the media recently. We're going to talk more about this with Andrew, but he does a great job of explaining it and also warning us of the dangers while at the same time giving us an opportunity and suggestions on how to counter it. So he was delightful. We even had a laugh or two during this serious interview, which is always good. But Andrew's terrific.
I mean, you got to laugh or cry.
That's right. We've done a lot. So we've done both. So stay tuned. Missy and I will be right back with Andrew Seidel from Americans United.
Hey listeners, our friends at Fellowship Southwest are inviting you to the Compassion and Justice Conference in Dallas on Friday and Saturday, September 20th and 21st. Fellowship Southwest is a Christian network focused on compassion, justice, and connection in their ministry and advocacy work.
Each day will feature nationally recognized keynote speakers on immigration, native justice, hunger, and racial justice.
Don't miss hearing from amazing preachers like the Tennessee State Rep Justin Jones, who became a nationwide figure when he was expelled from the State House for his activism after a school shooting.
The speakers promise to be transformational for our weary souls. But the big spotlight this year is on connection. Fellowship Southwest wants you to come and meet others who share your passions. Learn from each other, make new friends, and expand your network, and be part of a community dedicated to compassion and justice.
Learn more and register at fellowshipsouthwest.org. Not only will you get to hang out with us at the conference, but as an added bonus, our listeners can receive 20% off the ticket price with promo code GFM. That's GFM.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Andrew Seidel is Vice President of Strategic Communications for Americans United, an author and an attorney who defended the First Amendment for more than a decade. Andrew is the author of two books, The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American, and American Crusade, How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom. Andrew, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
It is my pleasure to join you. Thank you so much for having me on.
So, Andrew, thank you for being here today. I will tell you that, Project 2025 has really become part of our election vernacular this year. It's also been termed the 2025 Presidential Transition Project. Mm-hmm. Folks like you at AU and many others have really been sounding the alarms about this plan and trying to convince us all of its dangers. But however, in preparation for our interview today, I have done my research. And I want you to know that I have listened to an in-depth interview with Kevin Roberts himself, the president of the Heritage Foundation.
Yes.
And let me tell you, his word salad just put my mind at ease. So I want to tell you.
I was a little worried there, Missy. I thought you were going to pro Project 25. So
I told you that word salad was like a balm to my troubled soul. So I want to tell you a few things that he has set the record straight on before we let you get into talking about it. Sure, he tells us that the left is really mischaracterizing Project 2025, that no one who opposes it has actually read it, that there's really no national abortion ban coming, that this is really just all about personnel to make sure that unelected bureaucrats stop making laws, that they're organizing and recruiting thousands of regular, normal, competent Americans who love this country so much that they would uproot their lives and come to the imperial city of DC to drain the swamp. That this is really just like, and I kid you not, a Cheesecake Factory menu. That, not all of these things are going to be put into place. That, and also they've been doing this since 1980 with Reagan and their mandate for leadership. So really, it's just not that big of a deal. Feel better? I know I do. So with that said, I think we should give you a chance to respond. But first, without going into too many specifics, which we'll talk about later, give us the broad sense of how you view Project 2025.
Project 2025 is Christian nationalism. I mean, let's be very clear on that. Project 2025 is a plan for dismantling the federal government to advance the ultimate goals of Christian nationalism, which is overthrowing American democracy and installing a theocracy that takes away our freedoms. Church-state separation, incidentally, is the antidote that can stop Christian nationalism in its tracks. But a big part of Project 2025 is this 900-plus 4-pound playbook for white Christian nationalists, the Cheesecake Factory menu that you mentioned, right?
Right.
And this is for people who I'm sure your listeners are, but shorthand of Christian nationalists. It's an extremist political movement that believes in the lie that America was founded as and must remain a Christian country, and that our laws and policies must ensure that white Christians hold on to power and privilege. And that playbook, that 900-plus 4-pound playbook, reflects that belief deeply. It's really important, especially given Heritage Foundation's defense here. That playbook is just sanitized part that the Heritage Foundation felt comfortable publishing for all the world to see. But it's really just the tip of the iceberg, because the people and the groups behind it want so much more. So those groups like the Heritage Foundation and the Alliance Defending Freedom and First Liberty Institute and Family Research Council and so many more that have signed on to Project 2025. And these, by the way, are the groups that Americans United for Separation of Church and State is fighting against in court every single day. So Project 2025 was spearheaded by Christian nationalists, and it reflects many of their dangerous beliefs. And at kind of just a broad level, it seeks to take away our freedom to live as ourselves and believe as we choose. It will divert public funds to private religious schools. It'll roll back the rights of LGBTQ people. It'll ban the most accessible forms of abortion and limit reproductive health care. It'll erect roadblocks to racial justice. It'll redefine religious freedom as a license to discriminate. And some of those goals are by the way, more extreme than what's in the playbook itself. And, I was laughing so much at your spirited defense. There was recently some undercover video that was leaked of Russ Vaught, who is a self-professed Christian nationalist. And he's one of the authors and one of the driving forces behind Project 2025. And he actually assured the journalists who were undercover here that Project 2025 was going to, quote, rehabilitate Christian nationalism. But he also talks about the second, more secretive phase of of Project 2025, which is the implementation of it, right? Because again, that playbook's only the tip of the iceberg. So Vaught was talking about how they are drafting hundreds of executive orders, hundreds of regulations, and so much more to implement the policies that are in that handbook. So that as soon as they get into power, in that first 100 days, it's go, 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 go. And it's just this tidal wave of Christian nationalism crashing over the country. So the short version is that if Project 2025 is implemented, our rights and our democracy will be lost to Christian nationalists, extremists.
That's the difference, Andrew, because, I've heard a lot of people, especially some of our conservative friends, talk about, okay, well, this is just nothing but a conservative ideological document that will be implemented, similar to the Contract of America in the 90s. Project 2025 is not Contract with America that Newt Gingrich and congressional Republicans implemented when they took power. This is an attack on democracy itself. This is the undermining of democracy and the dismantling of democracy, as you just said. And one of the issues at stake, and this is one of the specifics that we want to talk to you about today, is if Project 2025 is implemented, it will drastically reduce health care for millions of Americans in this country. And more specifically, it's going to change fundamentally women's reproductive rights.
Oh, yeah.
So can you talk about what Project 2025 will do to healthcare in America, and then more specifically for women's reproductive rights in this country?
I mean, one of the more haunting phrases in that playbook, again, the part that they felt comfortable publishing to the world, right, is when they talk about instituting, quote, abortion surveillance to intimidate pregnant people who need abortion care. And really, if you read that playbook, they are talking about basing all federal policy on the narrow religious belief about life beginning at conception, and that abortion is not medical care, regardless of what reality or science or medicine say.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a vast rolling back of those basic protections, even more so than we've already seen. And it gets it's not just that. I mean, it's that in every other issue that affects your life and that you care about, right? Within its first few pages, Project 2025 proclaims that it's going to erase protections for LGBTQ plus people, for LGBTQ equality, for, again, reproductive freedom, and diversity and equity, because they conflict with these Christian nationalist beliefs. It incorrectly injects Christianity into our constitutional history in a number of different ways. It actually redefines the pursuit of happiness to mean an individual right to, quote, be free to live as his creator ordained. Which is those are not the same thing, just to be clear. Right. That's just a personal, given somebody, I wrote a book about our founding and how the separation of church and state infuses. That one really bothers me, but it seeks to promote biblically based, that's a quote, biblically based family structures that then roll back protections for women, for LGBTQ people and families in public education.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to eliminate the Department of Education entirely. And with it, the federal oversight, which ensures quality education, equal access, and the protection of students who are LGBTQ plus, Black or brown, or who have disabilities.
Right.
And then it's going to funnel both taxpayer money and students into these unaccountable private Christian schools.
Yeah.
I mean, and the LGBTQ plus community is a big target of this, as much as women are, right? It's going to stop enforcing federal anti-discrimination for LGBTQ plus people in education, in workplaces, in healthcare, in social services. It outlaws what it terms the quote transgender ideology, so that transgender and gender non-conforming people are not going to be able to live as their true selves. It turns anti-discrimination laws against people who are seeking to fight systemic racism, immigration. They're talking about jailing 100,000 immigrants, making it harder for immigrants to get work authorization, abandon families that are fleeing persecution, and then, of course, restrict immigration for the people that it dislikes. You see it in things like adoption and foster care, where Project 2025 is going to funnel that critical funding to help children in foster care to those programs that promote, again, biblically based marriage. So it's everywhere. It's everything.
It is everything. And Andrew, I want to pick up on something that you mentioned earlier in that answer, and that was this idea of civilian surveillance to basically turn in your fellow citizen if you find them trying to receive abortion care, or if you find them identifying themselves as something other than what it says on their birth certificate. We think that those ideas are in this document, but those are actually being implemented today. We see that those laws in Texas when it comes to abortion care, basically turning citizens against one another, and being able to turn in a fellow citizen who is trying to receive abortion care, or turn in a physician who provides that. We see that here in Oklahoma with policies trying to turn teachers and counselors into surveillance for the state. This is just, it is not only frightening, but this dystopian worldview that they are putting upon the American people. It is such an overreach and such a I don't know what word I'm looking for here, but it's oppressive. It is so oppressive of what they're trying to do. And they're dividing America and Americans more and more with policies like this, trying to turn ourselves against one another.
Absolutely. I mean, that's authoritarianism. That's how it thrives and grows. And what we're effectively talking about is mob rule over the womb.
Right.
That's what we're effectively talking about. And you're right that it is being implemented in various places. I mean, the Department of Education there has effectively become a testing ground for Project 2025 policies. And one of the things that it talks about in that playbook is basically the same kind of line that they use for abortion, right? We're just returning control to the states. But then you look at what is happening in a state like Oklahoma, where you have Superintendent Ryan Walters, and he has these intimate ties to the Heritage Foundation, and including to Russ Vaught, and to Mary Vaught, who is she actually hired her private company to help his public image, to write his speeches, to write op-eds for him. And she is also the director of strategic communications for the Heritage Foundation, right? I mean, this is what they're talking about doing. I wrote an expose for Religion Dispatches recently on how we are seeing on the ground in Oklahoma in the public education system what Project 2025 would look like if it were implemented nationwide.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's switch gears for just a minute. Let's talk about how Project 2025 is surely going to help our pocketbooks, right? That's got to be how they're selling this, right?
Well, of course, Missy.
I mean, That's one thing that Mr. Kevin Roberts did not address in the interview that I listened to was about, maybe some tax breaks for the wealthy, corporations. So what's going on in our pocketbooks with Project 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this is like their sort of go-to. We're gonna give huge tax breaks to the wealthiest, and then that's going to trickle down. We've heard this for years. I mean, I've not seen much of that trickle down.
Right.
Nope.
Prosperity. I don't know about y'all. It seems to make more sense to just give that directly to the people. I mean, this is everything in it, from all of the policies we've just been talking about, Missy, all the way through any of the economic policy. It's about empowering the chosen few at the cost of everybody else, right? These are policies. This entire program is meant to privilege conservative, straight, white Christian men at the expense of everybody else in the country, to give them this special favored status, this special favored class, and to make everybody else second-class citizens. And that's why we say, like, this is Christian nationalism. I mean, that is the end goal of Christian nationalism, is creating those two separate classes of people. And everything from the economic policies that you can tease out in there, to the international policies, to the Department of Education, to the adoption, to literally everything, is meant to further that basic goal.
Yeah, and Missy's question, I think, and your answer speaks directly to what this document is, its intention, and that is to create a larger divide between the oligarchs of this country and the rest of us. And the research that I've been doing on this gap between the rich and the poor is continuing to get wider and wider, and the policies coming out of Project 2025 will not only enhance that, it will expedite it immensely. And here's the biggest untruth of this for me, Andrew, and I'll let you speak to this, is that this whole idea of trickle-down economics that was sold to the American public in the 1980s, there is a hint of truth to that. But here's the lie, is that what is trickling down is not going to change your life. In fact, what it does, it makes you comfortable with being in your position, to just stay at that level, that you should be happy that you have, this job. You should be happy that you have this employer who is making billions and billions of dollars while, you stay at this one level. There is no attempt to try to rise out of that level. If you can become satisfied and accept the status quo, then they can continue to get wealthier and wealthier and wealthier.
I think there's an element of truth to that. I also think there's another element, which is that to the extent that you are unwilling to accept that status quo, that you blame not the oligarchs, but other people at your same level who are different than you.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important. And I mean, one of the things that we are struggling with in this conversation is how big a threat this is, right? So at Americans United for Separation of Church and State, we knew about Project 2025 back in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And I did read this 900-page handbook.
No, you didn't. Kevin Roberts said you didn't. I mean, absolutely no. You didn't.
And not only did I read it, I continually went back and it was not fun. But reading it, I was overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And it really does. It presents this big challenge because it's 1,000 pages almost of legalese and sanitized jargon, and the threat is vague but also overwhelming, and it's going to affect you, but it's also a future threat. So it's kind of disconnected from people's lives and stories. So it really does present a challenge for everybody who's trying to talk about it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a moment ago, kind of touched a little bit on the Department of Education. And that is one thing that, again, in listening to Kevin, he said that is the one absolute thing he is unapologetically wanting to do, is just dismantle the Department of Education, citing that if COVID taught us nothing, it's about how teachers and teachers unions are holding our students hostage. This whole system needs to be obliterated because that's going to be better for the student. So obviously vouchers are wrapped up in that. Some of the things you mentioned earlier that are happening in Oklahoma. But on a grand scale, I have a question. In him saying that dismantling the Department of Education is going to be better for the students, like how?
Well, I mean, again, when they say students, they don't mean all students, right? They mean straight white conservative Christian students. That's what they mean. And I mean, really, the attack on public education from Christian nationalists really dates back to Brown versus Board of Education.
Yep.
And the moment that you have a order desegregating the public school system, you have the Christian nationalists attacking and undermining public education. This vouchers were created to work around Brown versus Board of Education. They were created as a way to maintain segregated education in America. That's why they exist. And since then, there has effectively been kind of this two-pronged strategy of eroding, degrading, and eventually destroying public education, while at the same time pointing to all that work they're doing and lifting up private Christian schools and trying to get kids into them through things like vouchers, and then all these this many-headed hydra of these like neo vouchers, like education savings accounts and things like that. And for several waves throughout our recent history, you've seen success with that. They have done a good job of convincing a lot of people that this is about choice. But in American Crusade, I really lay out how really all of that is dog whistles that trace directly back. I mean, you can trace it almost literally directly back to them trying to avoid sounding like the racists they were.
Now, if there was one bright spot that we're seeing a big pushback on, even among conservatives, Andrew, it is public education. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that here on the front lines here in Oklahoma. You mentioned Ryan Walters a while ago, and hard to even get his name out of my mouth these days. But anywho, we are seeing conservative lawmakers here in the state. We're seeing rural districts push back against this extreme right-wing ideology that he's trying to implement across public education, because I think a lot of these rural communities are finally getting it.
Absolutely.
Vouchers, choices will destroy their local school systems.
Absolutely. And it doesn't offer them a choice for the most part, right?
It doesn't offer them a choice at all.
Rare. Yeah, it's very rare that you're going to find the economics of putting a school in a rural school district do not work out.
Right.
So if you want the economics to work out, it's simply not possible. That's why we have public schools that serve those students. And the idea that choice would actually give them a choice, it's simply not there for most of those families. And I think so. A lot of these rural families are standing up, and a lot of their representatives are saying, "No, this does nothing for us." And the fact is that public schools serve everybody, and that's what they're supposed to do.
Right.
And they done right, they don't inculcate students in any one religion. They leave that to the families to decide and educate their students about a particular religion or not. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it should be. They should learn about math and science and reading and art and all that stuff, and then go home and they can get their religious education from their family, or go to church or some other house of worship on the weekends and get their religious education there. That's the way it should be done.
Yeah.
That's what we want. That's the vision for this country. I'm a big defender of public schools.
All right. There's one other topic I want to talk about, because all of these issues, income equality, public education, healthcare, all of this is really not going to matter if we do not have a planet that is sustainable. Mm-hmm. And a big part of Project 2025 is the repealing of regulations when it comes to environmental protections. So, Andrew, can you speak about how dangerous this document and this policy would be if we got rid of the EPA, for example? We got rid of regulations that are harmful to the environment. This is terrifying to me.
Me as well. I went to law school to save the world, to help combat the climate crisis. And I actually went on to get a second law degree in international environmental law for that same reason. And it's one of the reasons that I fight to maintain that separation of church and state here in the USA today, which a lot of people don't track. But I know that work that I do separating church and state advances the fight against the climate crisis. And love to come back on and connect those dots for you sometime.
I would love that.
But you are absolutely right. I mean, you could say goodbye to the EPA, which makes sure that you have clean drinking water and air that you can actually breathe, let alone on the front lines trying to end the climate crisis. I mean, this would roll back. We haven't made a ton of progress on any of those fronts, but this would roll back all of that progress and set us even farther and farther and farther behind and closer and closer to the brink. Is deeply problematic on that front.
Well, Andrew, before I hand you over to Missy for our final question, there's one thing I think we really need to address, and that is there's a human cost associated with all of this. So speak to us about what that human cost is and how organizations like Americans United countering this effort of Project 2025.
Well, as I was reading through that playbook, right there on page 477, it mentions in everything but name a lawsuit that Americans United has been fighting for years. And this is Liz and Gabe Rutenram. They're this wonderful couple in Tennessee. They're unable to have biological children of their own. And they identified a special needs child that they hoped to foster and adopt. And the state-funded agency that trains and certifies potential foster families refused to work with Liz and Gabe because they are Jews. So Liz and Gabe were unable to adopt that child, denied the joy of parenthood from an agency funded with their own tax dollars because they are Jewish. Now, with help from Americans United, Liz and Gabe sued over that religious discrimination, and we've been winning in court. Because we're winning, Project 2025 targets lawsuits just like theirs, all but mentioning Liz and Gabe by name. It said on page 477, the faith-based adoption agencies that serve these children are under threat from lawsuits due to their religious belief. Right? That is how granular this playbook gets. So if Project 2025 is realized, religious freedom is going to become a license to discriminate, and taxpayers are going to be forced to fund that discrimination. Potential parents are going to be rejected if they are what some consider to be the wrong religion. I'm doing air quotes on an audio medium. Or if they're LGBTQ, right? Kids are going to be denied homes and families because they don't fit the Project 2025 mold of a biblically based family. And so I wanted to meet that challenge that we were talking about with Project 2025 about this vague, uncertain future threat that's disconnected from people's lives. So at Americans United, we filmed the short 2.5-minute video telling this story. And even though it's just one tiny piece of this 900-page monster, as Gabe says in the video, if Project 2025 can come for us, it can come for anyone. Mm-hmm. And we built up an entire paid media and communications campaign around this video. We ran it at the two conventions. Anything people can do, if you are looking for a way to talk about Project 2025 in a way that is just helpful and moves the needle, just share this video. It's one of the easiest things that you can do. Americans United has got you covered. We have everything you need in a huge toolkit that we just put together. So if you go to au.org/project 2025, at the top of that page is a toolkit link. Click on that and you get everything you need. We've got a one-pager on how to talk to local candidates about Project 2025. We've got graphics you can share on social media, including infographics. We've got rally signs that you can print, including one that says Project 2025 is Christian nationalism. We've got information on how to have conversations about Project 2025 with your family and your friends, including sample text messages and emails that you can use to spread the word among your networks. And that really is, I think, one of the most important things people can do, because believe it or not, you are a trusted messenger to many of the people in your life. So raise the alarm. So again, that's au.org/project 2025, and then click on the toolkit. Again, everything you need. And we are adding more as people are asking for more, and includes that 2.5-minute storytelling video of Liz and Gabe on how Project 2025 targeted them, which I would hope everybody will share far and wide.
Well, Andrew, we cannot thank you enough, my friend, for coming on the pod this week. A lot of times we think about this document, Project 2025, as something that is dark and mysterious. But the reality is parts of this document are already being implemented across the country. Mm-hmm. And so we are hopeful that people of good faith will stand up to counter this, to show up and speak out against this document, because this is not only detrimental to the faith that many of us practice, but also certainly anti-democratic as well as un-American as can possibly be. So thank you so much for coming on the pod. But Andrew, before we let you go, we've got one last question that we ask all of our guests, and Missy has the absolute privilege of asking the question.
Well, before I ask, I do want to just take a minute and thank you, Andrew, for doing what has to be the very worst book report assignment ever given, and being the guy in the group who does all the work. So thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate you sharing with our audience. But as you know, Andrew, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
My more to tell is that the wall of separation between church and state is an American original. It is an American invention. The idea for it was floating around in the Enlightenment, but it was first implemented in the American experiment. Until then, no other nation in the history of the world had sought to protect the ability of its citizens to think freely by separating religion and government. And I think that's something that we should be proud of. And I certainly think it's something we shouldn't undermine with myths about being founded as a Christian nation. There's a whole lot that is wrong with our Constitution, but that wall of separation is a unique and genuine contribution, not just to political science and thought, but to all humanity.
Well said, sir. Well said. Andrew Seidel is the Vice President of Strategic Communications for AU. You can find out more about Americans United work at au.org. Andrew, I'm going to take you up on your invitation. We're going to have you back to talk more about the environment on another episode. But thank you so much for being with us. It's always a delight, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, Missy, we've been wanting to have somebody on the pod for a long time to talk about Project 2025. Andrew graciously gave us some time, and it was worth every moment.
Yeah, we tried to get President of Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts on, but
he wouldn't take my calls.
Totally kidding. Yeah. Hopefully everyone's getting the sarcasm spewing out in this entire episode. But no, we're so appreciative of Andrew. He's so knowledgeable and so kind to take time to talk to us about this. I know they are very busy over at Americans United right now.
Yeah, very busy. And hey, I appreciated the research you did prior to the interview. I mean, having to listen to Kevin Roberts' interview, hats off to you.
I knew you were doing a lot of reading up and research on kind of expertise on this document. Kind of, it's more in line with our values, right, and things we hold dear. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna listen to somebody else and see what they're saying about this thing. And it was my Google searches to find some interview footage were pretty funny. And my Google feed was like super confused because the algorithms are obviously not set to be bringing up like Fox News interviews on my feed. It was like, wait, what did you say? Did you really mean that? Yes. So I just thought it was so. And again, I tried to pull some quotes, but it is such a word salad that they're trying to put together that you can't even go back and retell. And I think that's by design. But one of the things, that Kevin Roberts was saying is, don't worry about it. It's like the Cheesecake Factory menu. You're not going to really order everything on the menu. We just have these policies all planned out just in case you want them, was kind of like the gist of it. But, when he was referring to kind of lawmakers and such, that they just don't have time to take care of writing these policies. They just need the sound bites. They just need the the stepping off points. We're going to take care of all this behind the scenes stuff. It just, I don't know. It felt very schmarmy to me.
Yeah.
But I can, at the same time, I can also see if you're not somebody who's been intricately involved with issues of, separation of church and state or Christian nationalism, or, documents such as these that can take hold and really shape our nation. I can see how you'd be like, okay, that all sounds fine. Sure. You know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is. Kevin Roberts certainly has not been to a cheesecake factory here in Oklahoma because us Okies order everything on the menu. Even if we don't eat it, we order it and it just sits there. But it is quite terrifying once you begin to break through the rhetoric and really understand what this document is truly about. And as Andrew alluded to in the interview, this is a document like none other. If implemented, not only is it going to implement different policies upon government, it's actually going to dismantle the very institutions that make us a democracy and a thriving government. And so that is what's terrifying about it, is that they really are wanting to use this document as a launching point to break down the traditions of this country.
Well, they're just convincing people that our departments and our systems are so flawed that surely we just have to we'll get rid of it. And don't worry, we'll rebuild it, we'll put our people in place. And that's what's scary is, obviously, anytime you get a government or a country of this many people, it's not perfect. Like you've said many times before, we are trying to build a more perfect nation. It is not perfect. But at the same time, some of these institutions they're looking to do away with, like you mentioned, the EPA, the Department of Education, all of these are there for a reason. And, they're to provide services to take care of all people. And you got to really think twice about putting people in power that leave out that all.
Yeah. And as I was doing my research, like you were, on the interview today in Project 2025, I was listening to some audiobooks about Project 2025, listening to some podcasts. And what was really intriguing to me, Missy, as I was driving across this country, literally, was the importance of this document and the significance that this document can have on shaping not only current policies, but future generations to come. And there are two moments on my trip that I was reminded about this point. One was a positive, in my opinion, a positive reaction from a document. And then the other was a horrible reaction to a document that was presented. So I always get giddy, and you can contest to this, when I drive through Danbury, Connecticut. And Missy, why is Danbury, Connecticut important to me?
Because the Danbury Baptists were the ones that wrote to Thomas Jefferson asking him to please include the separation of church and state in our founding documents.
Wow.
Did I get that right?
Absolutely, you got it right. Man, that was really good. You have been listening over these decades. When our third president, Thomas Jefferson, was in office, the Danbury Baptist in Connecticut wrote to the president begging him for help because they were still being persecuted because of their beliefs there in Connecticut. And that is when Jefferson writes them back. And in the letter, he picks up on a metaphor by a previous New Englander 100 years earlier, and that is Roger Williams. Who talks about the importance of a hedge between the garden of the church and the wilderness of the world. Well, Jefferson changes that metaphor from a hedge to a wall and talks about the importance of the separation of church and state, and that there should be a wall erected between the two. And so using that metaphor, that letter became paramount in protecting religious liberty for every citizen in this United States, no matter if you practice religion or you choose not to practice religion. The importance of that document is that church and state remain separate and that there is a wall between the two. That document had an important positive influence upon the policy of the United States.
And I think what was so, to me, poignant in what Andrew said in his More to Tell, was just reminding us that separation of church and state is an original, American idea, or an American original. And like he said, it had been, thought of during times, but we really are the first country to offer this throughout history. I thought that was just really neat. I mean, we should be proud of that. We're OG, separation of church and state people.
Absolutely. So that that document had a positive influence upon the country, and that was 1801. 79 years later, we forgot that principle, and we neglected that document. Because then another document takes hold across this country that affected my ancestors, and that is the Pratt Doctrine. General Richard Henry Pratt codifies what is known as the Pratt Doctrine, and in very simplistic terms, it is simply this: to save the person, you must kill the Indian. And in order to do that, you must strip them of all of their indigenous cultural identity. And so I spent the night on my trip in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where in 1879, General Pratt established the Carlisle Indian and Agricultural School. And it was a really poignant moment for me, spending the night there and then driving out the next day, to think about the effect that document not only had upon the indigenous children of that area, but the indigenous children all across this country. Because not only was there a school in Carlisle, then another school crept up here in Oklahoma that I've talked about here before, and that's Shalako, where my ancestors resided at the early ages of, I think, 12 and 11 years old, my great-grandmother and her sister. And that document, that ideology was implemented into the American political system and had not only a negative effect on everything, but it was just atrocious and evil, because now we are discovering grave sites where Native children died alone. In some cases, there's an assumption that they may have been murdered in some of those schools, and it's just a really dark moment in our history. And it all became real when the Pratt Doctrine, a document that was produced, came into being. And so while documents can have positive influences on our country, there are others that can have very negative consequences to them. And that is what we're trying to educate people about Project 2025. Project 2025 is more like the Pratt Doctrine than it is the letter to the Danbury Baptist that Thomas Jefferson wrote. If implemented, this is going to have terrible ramifications for our country, but not only our country, more importantly, the people who make up this country. Flesh and blood people will suffer if this is implemented.
Well, and like Andrew said, this document is Christian nationalism on full display.
Yeah,
and we need to remember that.
Yeah, I'm so glad he said that.
Yeah, it's just kind of, and when I was listening, like I said, to that interview with Kevin Roberts, and he was just trying to say, oh, it's just a document, it's just papers. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying, these two these are just the documents you're referencing are just, two of lots of them that have shaped our nation and have had ripple effects throughout. I mean, obviously the Danbury Baptist letter, but the Pratt Doctrine.
Right.
When you want to talk about generational trauma,
oh my gosh,
and the ripple effects that are still happening today. So I mean, we need to take these things seriously. We need to speak out against it. We need to be well informed and understand that this is a very dangerous ideology. It's a very dangerous document, and unfortunately, will also allow for lazy politicians to really do some really terrible things. You're just like, oh, like he said, this is a cheesecake menu. You want to have this policy that's going to, quote unquote, air quotes again,
right,
save babies. You pull out these, healthcare laws that are going to limit women and surveil women. And so you just see how it's just so problematic.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I learned a lot from our conversation with Andrew. I hope that our audience did as well. One of the best pieces of advice he gave us was to educate ourselves and to share resources about this document, Project 2025. Americans United has resources at their site. We have resources at our Faith and Democracy Initiative here at Good Faith Media. Please check out both of those sites, share those resources, because we need to make certain that Project 2025 never sees the light of day.
Absolutely, I agree.
Well, Missy and I will be back next week. Until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.